Yo, James, what's going on, man? Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it. I know it's a long time coming, so um, I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Really excited for the show, Peter, and thanks for everything you're doing for the community and putting out all this great content.
Yeah, thank you so much. So usually what I do is just try to get a background for everybody that listens, all my listeners and everything like that. So can you fill everybody in, who you are, where you started in this journey, and where you're at today?
Perfect. Yeah, so I've been in the commercial real estate business now for 25 years. So I graduated from Colgate class of 98 as an English major, knew nothing about real estate, and thought that maybe I'd go out to the West Coast and start making movies until I realized that no one was paying me to do that. So I went up to the Career Service Center. And at this point, all my friends had investment banking jobs, but I figured, see what was up there. And fortunately, a former Colgate alum, Paul Massey, was looking to hire an associate at his real estate brokerage firm, Massey Knackle. And so, I said, look, this sounds interesting. Went to go meet with him and his partner, Bob, and just had a great gut feeling about them and what they were doing, and started my real estate career. And I started as a junior broker assisting Bob, and then going off and creating my own territory, and had a great run with them. Was named a partner and with them for 17 years. We sold to Cushman about 8 or 9 years ago, had 3 great years there, and then had the opportunity to build up the investment sales platform at Avis and Young. So here we're based in New York City. We handle all asset classes, multifamily, retail, office, and land. That's my brokerage experience. And then I've been fortunate along the way to be an investor, both as an LP, GP. I've been a partner in 2 real estate funds. So I love the experience and the vantage point that brokerage brings to the table when investing. And that's what I've shared about in my book, The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing, and my podcast, which is the same name.
Nice. And so let's talk about, the sale to Cushville Wakeman. How was that? How, did you guys initially position yourselves to do that, or was that something that you guys built up to do?
Well, I was with the company for 17 years, but they had been, going strong for the 10 years prior, and they had an incredible business model. And by the time we sold to Cushman, we were selling 4 times the amount of properties as the next brokerage firm in New York City. I mean, think about that in a market as competitive as New York, to go in there, do 4x market share. And so we had this incredible niche, and it was a great platform where we focused on a territory system and handled building sales. We were really middle market players, so we weren't doing the big stuff. So for total dollar volume, we might not have been as big as some of the big national shops. But originally we went out and we were looking to expand nationally, and we were looking for a partner to help us do that. And along the way, Cushman said, we've got a void here in New York in investment sales. And so they acquired our company. And again, I had 3 great years there, and there's plenty more people left from Massey Knackle who are still there and plugging away. So it was definitely a great experience.
Nice. And so I guess let's take it back to first couple of years, cutting your teeth and everything else in commercial real estate, and then speed it up today. What have you seen that has changed for the good and also, the bad? What are some things that you were doing initially back then, and then now what are you doing that you really enjoy, and also the fruits of your labor, spending your time in the business?
Sure. So I think things that we did really well was, first of all, we had a business plan. The fact that we had the territory system and divided the city up into areas, and we had brokers covering each neighborhood, was a great way to start off, especially when you're new to the business. So before I could even pick up the phone and start making calls, my job was to learn every single thing about the Chelsea neighborhood in Manhattan, all the sales, who was buying, who was selling, zoning changes, what rents were. And what that really did was help me bring value to the table when I started making my calls, as opposed to, other brokers out there who were just dialing for dollars. So that was a great way to start. But that being said, yeah, when I started off, it was a lot of cold calls and trying to cultivate relationships. I mean, now fast forward 25 years later, I'm really fortunate that I've built incredible relationships, clients who I've transacted with multiple times. And it's you don't have to always be thinking about, how am I going to go out and find my next piece of business. So, and now I've got an incredible team. We have close to 30 people here in the group. So I get a lot of support, a lot of help, so I can do fun things like this, where I can share insight not only into brokerage but also into investing, and gave me time to write the book and the podcast and all good things.
Nice. Yeah. And I think, especially even, the first 7 to 10 years in the business, I would say, even though you have some reoccurring clients and everything else, but it's still, especially when market changes and stuff like that, it's one of those to get back on the phone and make sure that, you're, still cultivating those relationships that you've already built over the years. And I think, especially now, you could probably attest to this. This is one of those times where it's like, okay, well, hey, let's just touch base with those, main players that I've always been in, contact with. And then the people that I haven't been in contact with as much, reinvigorate those, conversations and also relationships.
Peter, you're so right. Even if you've known someone for a long time, look, if you're doing something like brokerage or sales, there's plenty of people out there doing this, and they're constantly trying to stay top of mind. And so you can't just rest on your reputation or past dealings. You need to, always stay ahead of the game, and always, I think, putting and delivering great content. So I spend a lot of time thinking about, what do the next couple of years look like, put myself in my client's shoes so I can be most helpful. And also as an investor, I'm thinking about trends, where are things going? And so that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, especially now, it's like, okay, well, there's so much push on, these shared workspaces, and then, as we evolve as, a world, there's so many different things, AI and everything else that's coming into play, but there's still a lot of fundamentals that are there, and you've built those fundamentals over your career. The So as we look at the market now, what are you seeing, and like where, speaking to either following up with clients and or, still continue to build out business, like what does that look like for you today outside of your team and everything else? Because I know commercial real estate has definitely shifted significantly.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a tremendous amount of data out there, and how we do our jobs today is different than how I did it, 20, 25 years ago with a three-ring notebook, and, taking physical photos of every building and pasting them onto the page, so to speak. So there's incredible data out there that does help make our job easier. And whether it's finding out an owner's information, property information, air rights that are available, debt that's on a property, which in this market, and where I think, Peter, a lot of the opportunities are going to come is owners who have debt that's coming due, and they have to pay down their loans. So in some cases, they might not have the ability to, maybe they don't have the desire. That's going to create a lot of transactions. And so when we're now looking at properties today, the first thing we're looking at is what kind of debt do they have on the property. And if you see a broker who's asking $5 million for a property, and you see they owe 7 million to the bank, obviously that's not going to work. So you need to make sure that obviously you're dealing with the right person. Does someone have enough equity in the deal to transact, or do you need to be speaking to the lender?
Yeah, good point. And then, I mean, I think the other thing that you could probably speak on is, insurance has gone up. So a lot of people that have bought are now faced where, premiums have gone up significantly. Especially, I'm in California, so those of either the companies have left California and or they've gone up significantly. So a lot of people have tried to manage that, which is way different than what it was before.
Mm-hmm.
Have
Yeah,
you
no doubt.
seen? I was just going to ask a follow up on that. Have you seen this before? Because you've been in the business for quite some time and you have a good amount of experience. Have you seen this before in insurance specifically?
Uh, Not like this. I mean, specific to construction, specific to labor, specific to liability. I think a lot of the construction insurance has, had a dramatic increase. But I think what we're seeing with all the uh, natural disasters. I mean, I think that's really what's putting huge pressure on coastal cities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so when you're when you're sitting there reaching out to clients and stuff like that, adding value, I mean, granted, you knew and you know when they subdivided, those sections of, New York and said, hey, James, this is your area. You need to know Chelsea. How do when you did that, you added value to those clients because those clients didn't know the ins and outs, how big that, property was, what the square footage was, what the pictures is. So translate that to today. How are you? I'm a new, um, associate. I come to you and I'm like, hey, how do I add value to my clients? How are you telling those associates how to add value to those new clients that they had never worked with and they don't have as good of pedigree as you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's so important to study and always be, after you've picked your area of focus, you really have to spend the time, do the work to understand what's going on. And clearly you can stay up to date with, there's a lot of great news sources out there for commercial real estate, certainly following the comps and understanding what's trading. But I think beyond that, there's no substitute for actually speaking to investors who are in the market. So I know, for example, when we put out our market reports and we're looking at reporting sales, we're talking to the seller and the buyer, and we're trying to understand the trade. And even if there is a cap rate that's reported, we're trying to understand what was behind that. And so that's really where the true knowledge comes in, because I think a lot of the times the raw data only tells half the story. And so I think to be a great investment sale broker, you really have an understanding of, why things trade for what they do. And that also, when you go to value a property, you have a much better sense because you can compare that to other things that not only have traded, but also things that were currently in the market. So that's also the difference, with a broker's opinion of value to say maybe an appraisal. An appraisal is going to look at past sales. And, if you're in a market like we are now, where since last June, rates going up, downward pressure on pricing, I mean, appraisers might be scratching their heads. They're trying to figure out how to reconcile sales that maybe closed when rates were lower. And so sometimes what we're doing is we're talking about deals where we're negotiating contracts, we know where pricing is, and that can give us a much better handle on where things stand.
Yeah, 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 no, no, good point. Yeah, I think, you know, being even if I feel like there's a lot of people, especially in residential for me, there's a lot of people that don't keep pulse on the market. And it's refreshing, especially on, if you're talking to your financial advisor, or me talking to you, James, like, not only a specific area in, let's just say New York or, Florida, or wherever that is, but you also know what the pulse is on the market and what you can actually give value to. And that there's so many times that you talk to someone and they say, hey, how's commercial real estate? And you're like, man, it's crazy, but then if you can give a detailed description on why it's crazy and give some backing and data, that brings more knowledge to that person, which ultimately gives them more trust with you as potentially their broker.
That's a great point, and we really take a lot of time and effort to put together our quarterly reports and understand the numbers behind them. And you're exactly right. When you ask someone what the market is doing and they say, "Oh, it's busy, oh, it's off, things are slow." Well, how slow? What percentage? What are you comparing it to? So when
Hmm.
some asks me, how's the New York City investment sales market going? I can say, well, the 10-year average is about $35 billion in total sales. And this year we're on track for less than 10 billion, right? And then the next question is, well, why is that? And then you can get into that conversation. But again, have those data points. Another one is where pricing has gone. Everybody wants to know, where has pricing gone since the second quarter of last year to today, where we've had interest rates, mass expansion, downward pressure on pricing. So to be able to understand that multifamily cap rates have increased by 100 basis points. Again, I'm not just throwing out a rough number or, prices are down. There's really something that you can hang your hat on.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I agree where it's like you can give that data and the point and also where it's going to go versus, someone just giving, an arbitrary answer that they heard off, a news outlet. That gives a lot of people confidence. And ultimately, when you sit down at the table across from a client or a future client, they go, dude, I remember James because James has, this action and also a strategy versus I sat down with Jeff and Jeff didn't give me anything, or he just said, this is kind of what I would do and didn't really have some sure answers. Um, so as the market pivots, as like you said, debt and everything like that, is there, when you're having those conversations with clients, how has that changed from the last couple of years to get a new client and or continue that relationship that you had?
Well, the one thing I would say is there's a lot going on in the market. And with that, you have a lot of the long-term investors on the sidelines waiting. Because as soon as rates started going up, pricing starts coming down, a lot of the buyers say, look, I'm going to just wait because I think there's going to be better opportunities. So if you're a broker and doing your job, you are always looking for new buyers coming into the market. So we're actually doing a tremendous amount of business right now with foreign investors. And that's a lot of work. You can't just sit back and just wait for those people to show up. You have to be proactive with your outreach. So I think that's certainly a big part of the job is expanding your network, not just relying on the same client base that you have, because again, it's the market evolves. There's new players always coming into the space. There's various trends. I mean, for example, in New York, multifamily, we have rent regulation, which has had some severe changes over the last couple of years. What that has actually done is taken a lot of those long-term multifamily owners here in New York, and many of them, because of these changes, have decided to invest outside of New York. Okay.
Hmm.
So if you're the broker looking at the situation, there's going to be sales out of New York and there's going to be acquisitions in other markets. And so I think that's important as well, is basically staying in touch with your client base and seeing where their head is and making sure that you're being as helpful as possible if they're looking to make those moves.
Yeah, I mean, I face the same thing, especially, people, California has rent control, California over the whole state. There's a cap that you can get to, basically, 8.5 to 10%, depending on the area. And there's cities that have rent control specifically. They can't go over that. But have you seen people? Because I kind of think of the real estate market, commercial and residential, as two different, countries in the sense that New York and California are completely different than Wisconsin. Because appreciation, and even when you bump rents, even in California, for instance, you can bump them a couple $100, a unit versus, or, 300 to 400, depending on where you're at, versus if you go to the Midwest, it's like $15, $20, depending on what the product is and everything else. For you, have you still seen people that say, hey, rent control, it's bad, but I'm staying in New York because it's such a valuable asset and it's still going to continue to go up?
Well, so we still have fair market. So not out of the roughly 3 million housing units in New York, only a million are regulated. So you still have fair market units where you do have that ability. If a tenant vacates, you can improve it and charge an increase. So certainly there are investors who are looking at that, and most of them they want a building that's either all fair market or predominantly fair market so they can take advantage of that upside. There's also great opportunities to increase your rents in retail. We've seen retail at one point after COVID, some of those retail rents were 20, 30 cents on the dollar to their peak. But now, as people are coming back to the city, tourists are coming back, we're seeing a huge upswing as well. So, to your point, I think in markets like New York or in California, where you have a lot of demand and the ability for rents to rise at a pretty exceptional rate, that yes, you will have investors who will accept a lower return today because of that future upside potential. I think there's another thing in that when you're investing in these, gateway cities, these top markets in the world, what's nice is there's always a global audience of buyers. So right now, even if our local New York buyers are on the sidelines, we're having investors come in from all over the world. And with that comes liquidity in the market. And I'm not saying that there aren't foreign investors looking in the Midwest. It's just not in the same magnitude, right?
Yeah.
And there's a certain, again, liquidity to the market where there's always investors or buyers in New York at a certain price, or in LA or San Francisco, or wherever you are.
Do you see those foreign buyers see the same kind of the same adage of what I said a couple of minutes ago? Is like they know New York, they know California, they know these big cities, they know what Dallas, they know that those it's not like people are going to be there are people going to leave, but at the same time they're kind of have that stranglehold, so they feel that that value is always going to be there. So is that the same adage as kind of what I mentioned earlier of that
Yeah,
appreciation? Is
no,
that how
no,
they feel?
no question. And look, I know we've got a lot going on in our market, but around the world, there's even much greater challenges. And so I think the certainty and the stability of our market, I think, is appealing to a lot of foreign investors. And so there's that aspect too.
For sure. No, yeah, and I see that. I think it holds true even with, what you see on, TV and you hear on radio and podcasts and stuff like that. There's still a lot of pent up demand in these markets. And you see it on appreciation, sheets all around the, United States. Like, you have some cities that have gone crazy over the last couple of years, and now they've shrunk significantly, like a Phoenix or, like an Idaho, Boise, and, like an Austin. Granted, I'm not saying that those are bad places to go move. I'm just saying like they went up significantly and then they've dropped activity wise. And then also, price point wise, just because, people stop going there as much. So,
Correct.
I think these big markets are good. So, as you built out, your team, you said what, 30 people roughly
Hmm.
on your team.
Yes.
So for you, what are some, valuable tools and or, advice you've given those people as they've come up along the ranks to, make them successful in the industry?
Right. So there's no substitute for hard work. I think that's, you know, uh, that's a given. But if you're not showing up and making the most of every minute in the day, there's only going to be so much that you can accomplish. So you put in more time. And again, it's got to be the right kind of time. There's of course, the old adage, work smarter, not harder. So you have to be doing the right things for sure, but you're going to get there a heck of a lot faster if you put in the time and the work. And for brokerage, for example, that means that whether you're doing your research, your comps, your valuation, you're doing that outside of the typical workday, because 9 to 5, you want to be on the phones, making calls, taking meetings, going and looking at properties. And so if you're doing paperwork and running numbers, you've got to do that early in the morning. So I've always been a very early riser when it comes to work or catching up on the weekends. I think that's really important. I think the other piece is clearly you want to be with great people, having a great mentor, and learn from those around you. That this is definitely a business that you learn by doing. And so I think surround yourself with great people who are willing to be, yes, giving with their time, but I think also just open to having you be a part of it. So when I started in the business, Bob and Paul were so busy with what they were doing. It's not like they sat me down and taught me how to do real estate brokerage, but I learned by listening. And that's why, look, there's so much value you can get out there today, whether it's, on a podcast or video series, but there's also, I think, no substitute for in person and being out there and listening and seeing and watching. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I mean, so I always tell, my team, it's like, hey, you can definitely get those phone calls in, but connect with that person in person on showings, because even if, they're not going to buy in 12 months or 12 days, they may buy, if it's not 12 days, 6 months or 12 months down the road or 18 months down the road. But if you get that conversation with them in person, they're going to have more buy-in to you as an individual than it would be if you just had one phone call with them and that was it, or phone call and then text, text, text. It's, if I meet now, James and we have more buy-in with each other because we've, been on podcasts together and everything else. Same thing with people. Like if you get on them, on a Zoom after a phone call and then work through like what the scenario is on what they want to purchase and run the numbers with them and then go out and show them a property, then it's, you're doing 90%, 95% more work than the next guy or girl. So,
yeah, without question, I think to do the work up front and to qualify and make sure you're spending time on the right opportunities is so important. So for us, this year, we're going to do a record number of valuations, but we're being very selective. And we have a lot of owners who say, look, can you take my property out to market at this price? And you'd love to help them out. But if they're not realistic with their pricing expectations, we're only wasting everybody's time, right? And in brokerage, time is our most valuable asset, right? Because we obviously we get paid commissions only on a success basis. But I think also if you take on an unrealistic assignment with a seller, you're delaying their decision-making process as well. They might be holding out, they might be missing out on another opportunity. So again, I think it is important to be realistic with what you can achieve, taking the right assignments on to make sure that you're being most efficient with your time.
yeah, 100%, more efficiency, making sure that those, calling for dollar counts, making sure that those communication, between you and the client count, and getting in front of those people, count for sure. So when you started out, or if I came to you and I said, hey, James, I'm looking to get into commercial real estate. I don't have too much of a runway in capital to keep, but what is it, what's that conversation, especially as you be in the industry for so long? What would you tell me, like, to get, if I'm strictly commission based, that's me, but if I'm strictly commission based, what type of, things are you doing as, or telling that person as the brand new associate or agent?
Right. So when I started in the business as a sales associate, I was lucky to have a salary. It wasn't much of one, but it was enough for me to pay my rent and get by. And then the hope was if I could bring in value, bring in business, then along with bonuses, then you could start to increasing your earning potential. And certainly by the time becoming a fully commissioned salesperson, then the great thing about it is there is no ceiling, right? You have that potential to earn as much as value that you can deliver.
Hmm.
So, but for those listening right now who are not in the position where they don't have enough saved up, because commercial, the sales process is longer than residential. The sales are more complicated. It could take 6 months, it could take a year. And we used to tell people when they started the business, don't expect to make any money in the first year. That's really daunting. Residential, and you would probably know better, but my friends who started there oftentimes jump right in with rentals just to get some commissions coming in and then start working on the sales, which is a longer process, right? Between not only finding the opportunity, but then closing on it. So I think it really depends on your situation. I think if you want to go into commercial and you want to try to find a salaried role, a great way to do that is as an analyst. And to do that, you need to have that education. So doesn't necessarily mean going and getting a master's degree. That certainly helps. But there's a lot of programs out there like Adventures in Commercial Real Estate that can help you learn how to underwrite and model properties. CCIM is another one. So you can bring that experience to the table. If you have that hard skill, it's that much easier to warrant, really command a salary, right? And then from there, if you want to transition, once you have a feeling for brokerage and go into commission, you can do that.
Yeah. For me, it's and I second what you just said. I mean, definitely make sure that for one, you have either some type of money set aside or, don't
Mhm.
be, picky about what you get. Do some rentals, do some,
Mhm.
purchases and or, do a mobile home or something like that if you're in residential.
Yeah.
It's the ones that are like, hey, I'm not going to do this, this, and this are the ones that ultimately, come after, 6 months of no commission and they say, I can't make it. I can't hack it anymore because, I didn't have that runway or I didn't have an open mind to do some stuff and get some more experience on that end for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, Peter, what I would add to that, and again, I don't want to minimize the fact that when people are starting off and they've got bills to pay, that is really scary to take that leap. But what
Yeah.
I would say is, and I've had people who've started with me when we didn't even have a position open, right? And someone said, "Look, I'd like to come work as an analyst." I said, "Well, that's great. We don't have a position open." And some of them have said, "Well, look, why can't I? I'll just come and I'll work for free." And in those situations, I've said, "Look, we don't feel right doing that, but maybe you start as an intern. Maybe we pay you hourly." And someone coming out of college, your goal might not be to work as an intern, but it is a way to say, hey, let me come in and show you what I can do, work hard. And I'm not going to say in all those situations, but in many of those cases where we had that analyst or that intern come in and really put in, go above and beyond, then when a full time position does open up, you're next in line. And if not, at least you've gotten great experience. So I think you do have to have kind of the big picture in mind. And it's better to take an opportunity where maybe there isn't, a great starting salary, but it gives you incredible experience that you can leverage in the future, as opposed to just going for the big paycheck, maybe right out of school where you're doing something that you're not passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think you know, making sure that, you're dialed into the right company or the right, group or team that you want to be aligned with. And then also, going back to what the mentor, kind of what you talked about with mentorship is like, it sounded like you didn't seek out specifically like, hey, Jeff, you're my guy. I'm going to follow you and, find out what you do. I'm going to, work at the company that you work for. And at times, if I struggle or I run into something, I'll ask you questions and I'll see you from, the office on what you do. And maybe I'll, accompany you on a couple of client, conversations and or in-person meetings. So, and I think that that's a perfect example that gives those people more experience than just, going up to Jeff and saying, I want to be your mentor. And, those types of scenarios I feel like are always the ones that kind of push people away. But like you said, you had, a perfect example of like, this is what I did to have a mentor and ultimately, saw them from afar and really worked hard to basically do what they were doing.
Yeah, no, it's really think about working with the right people and getting the right experience. That's so important.
Yeah, 100%. Um, so, last question before we transition, but for you, where do you see your team in the next 2 to 3 years? What does that look like?
Well, we're always evolving, and we have, I think the way we approach the market is unique to most of the brokerage shops out there. We function as one unified sales team. So we are covering New York City as one team. We have one commission pool, and we're looking to grow, but in the right way. Our idea is not to just become a team with 100 brokers. We want to grow in an appropriate way, and hopefully the market picks up again and we see more sales volume. But it would be uh, irresponsible to try to grow this when there isn't, that kind of certainty in the market, right? We want to build the right size team to service the work that we have out there, right? And we always want to be growing, but it's more important again to be growing with the right people. So we are what I would call for our market an upper middle market group, and we like that kind of 25 to $100 million space, but we also do a lot of fives and tens. And but we
Mhm.
like to continue to grow that and do larger and larger deals, of course. but I think you also have to acknowledge kind of where is your strong suit. And, we're definitely in that sweet spot where we work with a lot of private capital, maybe not with the big institutions. And sure, would I love to sell the glass and steel office buildings one day? Of course, but that's a whole nother world and a whole nother process of dealing with institutional investors and capital. And it's a whole nother world. So, it's good to be aspirational and say, look, we want to do larger and more important things. But I think we always just focus on how can we do things better. I think in many ways, we're tough on ourselves, that we're always trying to improve process. We're always thinking about how do we advance things and where the industry is going. And I think you were bringing up earlier about AI, and we're thinking a lot about how do we leverage technology to help our clients make better decisions, help us do our jobs better. So we're just, again, what I love about the business is constantly learning, constantly thinking about ways to improve. And I think that's what makes things really fun as well.
For sure. 100%. Well, James, I appreciate it. A couple last questions. We'll get you out of here. But
Sure.
for one, what's a good book? And we'll talk about yours in a second, but what's a good book that you kind of used or read in the last, 5 to 10 years that really helped you, on the trajectory to expand your business now?
Right. So for the brokers out there, and this is on the commercial side, but even if you're residential, I think this is going to help you. Rod Santamassimo has written a couple books, Brokers Who Dominate, Teams Built to Dominate, and then Knowing Isn't Doing. Those 3 books, I think, are going to be super helpful for your career and kind of the block and tackling and what you need to do to elevate your profile, become top of mind. So I would give those books specifically for the brokers out there listening.
Nice. Okay, cool. And then are you guys using any online resource and or apps that's helping you and your team more efficient?
Yes. Well, our workflow we track in Smart Sheets, which is again, it's like Excel on steroids.
Yeah.
So I think whatever technology you use, the key is you have to use it. So I've had really fancy databases and we only know how to use 10% of its functionality and then no one uses it. So whatever it is, you got to commit to it. It's got to work for you. Nothing's going to be perfect. So, but yeah, we've got great, whether it's CoStar or Reonomy, places that we can pull property data from as well.
Awesome. And then the last one, where can people find out more about you? I know you talked about your podcast and then also your book. So tell us about your book and also
Great.
podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So you can find out about my book, the podcast, the articles, and some video series at jamesnelson.com. So I built that site really for you, the listener, who's interested in investing in commercial real estate. So you're not going to go to the site and see all the great things I've done or what a great broker I am. It's really about how can I make you a better investor. And the reason why I wrote the book, The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing, is for 20 years, people ask me, James, what's the book? I want to learn how to invest in real estate. And maybe some of your listeners out there, maybe they're house flipping, maybe they're wholesaling, whatever it is, but maybe you're looking to graduate and you want to go buy a 10 unit or a 20 unit or a 100 unit, or you want to know what it's like to buy a mixed use property with retail and multifamily above. And this book teaches you exactly how to do it. I didn't want this book to be based on theory. I wanted it to really have actionable information. So if you read this, you'll say, okay, I get it. And by the way, if you're listening and saying, okay, James, I hear you, and this is really exciting and inspiring, and I'm hearing about you doing these 10, 20, $100 million in New York City, that's great. But, I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars in my bank account. The way the book starts off is talking about how this is a business about the people and how you can find great partners, and the value you can bring to the table is finding the deal. So let me tell you, if you can find a great opportunity and the book tells you how to do that, and you can find the right partner to do that deal with, that is a great way to start off as an investor. So the goal is, if you read that book, you say, look, I understand how this all works. I've got a roadmap. Obviously, there's no substitute for experience and going out and doing it, but I hope it will send your listeners well on their way.
Dude, that's huge. I appreciate it. Well, James, thanks so much for jumping on today. I really appreciate it. And I know you got a ton of knowledge. So, everybody check out his book and then also the website.
Thanks again, Peter. This was a lot of fun, and wishing all your listeners all the best.
Thanks, man.